I emerged from the steamy bathroom, plopped onto the bed, and fell back onto a bump in the fluffy teal and brown comforter, which exhaled from my weight. My hair was wet and uncombed, and tears pooled in my eyes. Not again, I thought. How can this be happening again? The maroon cashmere robe my mother had given me for Christmas several years earlier splayed open, revealing my freshly showered legs. I had no reason to be stressed or anxious. I had just completed a writing project I'd been working on for weeks, and I could finally relax and enjoy the summer. Yet this morning my chest felt tight and my lungs starved of oxygen. I drew in a long, slow, and deep breath, but the elusive, life-giving molecules seemed to bypass my lungs altogether, evaporating into a void of body cavities and crevices. I pushed myself up to sitting, legs dangling over the edge of the bed. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on my thighs, and breathed deep into my back. This usual trick no longer worked. What is wrong with me? The tears that had been gathering in my eyes spilled down the sides of my face. Air hunger. That's what it's called. Or at least that's what I'd read on the internet in an obscure forum a couple of years earlier, while unsuccessfully searching for answers as to why I couldn't breathe like everyone else. With short, shallow, effortless breaths. My breathing problem wasn't new. I remember as a young child lying in bed at night, panicking because I felt unable to breathe. I'd inhale and trace the air in my mind as it traveled down my trachea, into my bronchi and bronchioles, before seemingly slipping past the alveoli that were supposed to capture the precious molecules and supply my body with oxygen. Hoping, wishing that the next breath would be successful so that I could slip into a deep and restful sleep. Throughout my childhood, I watched my mother struggle in the same way. I noticed it most when she was sitting at the oak roll-top desk with her checkbook and pen paying bills. She'd placed her hands on her knees, lean forward, and inhale as deeply as she could, her chest expanding to accommodate the additional air. As a child, I wondered why I'd never seen anyone else struggle to breathe like this. When I asked, she attributed her breathing problems to stress. I guessed it was mostly due to the stress of not having enough money to pay all the bills. For most of my life, I assumed the same stress and anxiety had passed through my mother's DNA into mine, and that, unlike my sister, who appeared to waltz through life without a care in the world, she took after my father in that way, I would engage in a lifelong battle with anxiety and the labored breathing that came with it. During an air hunger episode, it feels like the intercostal muscles that line the space between my ribs are being squeezed together, making it impossible for the oxygen to flow into my lungs. To compensate, over the years, I'd tried altering my inhalations to draw in longer and deeper breaths. That sometimes helped. Mostly I'd catch myself leaning forward like I'd seen my mother do so many times, and breathing deep into my back. This offered temporary relief, but as the years passed, the problem became more severe. By my freshman year of college, my anxiety had reached a tipping point, and my doctor prescribed the anti-anxiety medication Paxil. I took the tiny pink pills for a few months, but the medication left me numb and incapable of feeling emotions. I weaned myself off of the medication and tried unsuccessfully to manage the anxiety on my own. To me, enduring the stress that accompanied my anxiety was more preferable than walking zombie-like through life, unable to feel the highs and lows of my experiences. A few years later, after I graduated from college and moved to Washington, D.C., I began practicing yoga and meditation. Both seemed to help quell the anxiety at times, but the breathing problems persisted, so I went online in search of solutions. That's when I first read about air hunger. I found comfort in knowing I wasn't alone, but no one could explain the phenomenon or understand why it was happening. Feeling defeated, I resigned to the fact that this was how I would have to live the rest of my life. Then came 2011 and a mini breakthrough. My husband Nick and I watched a lot of professional tennis. Over time, I zeroed in on a male Serbian tennis player ranked number 3 in the world. I watched him struggle with air hunger many times on the court. He didn't call it that. His camp attributed it to asthma. Others accused him of choking in tight matches because the condition often forced him to withdraw from high-level matches. But I knew what it was. I could sense what he was going through, and I wanted to scream to all his haters that it wasn't in his head. Then, out of nowhere, it was like a flip switched. His on-court breathing problems disappeared, and he began winning major tournaments. Lots of them, and he quickly ascended to number 1 in the world. The following year, he revealed that he learned he had a severe sensitivity to gluten, and that purging his body of the protein had a profound and positive effect on his breathing. A simple blood test revealed that I had gluten sensitivity as well. About 3 months after cleansing my body of gluten, the muscles in between my ribs began to relax. For the first time in my life, I was hopeful that this was the answer to my air hunger, until a few months later, when I found myself lying on my bed in my maroon cashmere robe, unable to breathe. My muscles were not the problem. They were still loose and flexible. I had been told before by others that the problem was all in my head, and in this desperate moment, I began to believe them. That's when Nick walked into the room and found me hunched over in tears. He'd seen me struggle with air hunger for years, and he knew I was at a breaking point. He began to feverishly research air hunger, and what he found later that morning changed my life. I don't remember the name of the website where he found the book, one coincidentally with a sad-looking woman on the cover sitting on a chair gazing out the window. But I can recall vividly the scene that unfolded as I read the description he placed in front of me. Sitting there on our plaid couch, still in my bathrobe, the tears flowed harder, but instead of frustration, they were spurred by an overwhelming feeling of relief. The description read as though it was written specifically for me, describing the condition as habitual overbreathing, and offered a promise of a solution. Within minutes, I'd purchased and downloaded the book onto my Kindle, flipped to the section labeled habitual overbreathing, and scanned the list of indicators. Breathing through the mouth, audible breathing during rest, regular sighs, regular sniffing, irregular breathing, holding of the breath, taking large breaths prior to talking, yawning with big breaths, upper chest movement, movement of shoulders while breathing, lots of visible movement, effortful breathing, heavy breathing at night. With the exception of regular sniffing, all of them applied to me. I skipped forward to the section titled How to Correct It and spent the next day and a half learning and practicing the prescribed breathing exercises. All other tasks and work could wait. After 2 days, I was breathing normally, with those short, effortless breaths I'd marveled at in others, for what felt like the first time in my life. My body felt fully oxygenated. I was energized and full of hope, but cautiously optimistic. I continued with the exercises, and with each new week that passed, with no incident, I began to believe that I too had flipped a switch. Now, nearly 4 years later, I rarely struggle with air hunger. When an issue does arise, usually associated with anxiety or stress, I still my body, quiet my mind, and return to the exercises from the book. I climb onto my bed, onto that same teal and brown comforter, sit up tall and cross my legs. I close my eyes and my mouth and hold my breath for 10 seconds. Then I draw in a shallow breath of air through my nose and follow it down into my stomach. I breathe out again and hold my breath until I feel a need for air. Breathe in, breathe out, hold. Breathe in, breathe out, hold. I continue the rhythmic cycle until I have satiated my body with oxygen and with life. That's mine.